This is the interglacial we are in for the last 8 to 10,000 years. And we understand from former cycles of 100,000 years that we need to stay in this interglacial. The risk, the biggest risks seem to be to to for the Antarctic and the poles to get above 0 degrees. We are the first of the last four glacials who stay around 0 degrees in Antarctica in the poles. So, so that's probably the reason we are still didn't crash out of our actual interglacial, out of the Holocene. If you would crash out, certainly everything that is not in the tropics and the subtropics would definitively suffer and almost totally depend on the tropics and subtropics, especially food production. So we have to stay in this 0 degrees, and the biggest risk is to surpass the 2 degrees above 0 degrees and to crash into a glacial, into an ice age for 100,000 years. So, how can we stay in this reach, even if the risk is significant that we crash out? Uh, uh, that would be with carbon agroforests. It could be with more Amazon forest, but I don't think someone will, country or whatever, would invest in it enough in it and deliver the millions of hectares that would be needed. So the only thing is that we that rests us is transforming agriculture in carbon agroforests, because agriculture land we have plenty more than we need to maintain ourselves in this 0 degrees at the poles. And globally, 30% is already degraded in a short period of time, which is a challenge by in its own. In its own. So we have plenty of it. We should transform it in carbon agroforests that produce 100 times more than our agriculture does. That is a subject of several of our videos. How do you transform degraded lands into carbon agroforests that are 100 times more productive than agriculture? And they also produce all other products that we humans need of, like, for instance, energy. Since it would come from carbon agroforests, it would be sustainable energy forms. It could be plus gasoline, it could be all kinds of forms of energy that we actually use in our cars and in our economies. So for now, we have to transform as much as possible degraded agriculture lands in carbon agroforests that are 100 times more productive and produce all we humans need. If this would be in the tropics and the subtropics, or mainly in the tropics and the subtropics, whenever we would crash into a glacial, these could produce for us 8 billion humans. We have plenty of videos about this subject, how the tropics and subtropics can produce for 8 billion humans or even more. So we have to do this to build carbon agroforests like the Amazon Amaranth built the Amazon forest, which is a carbon agroforest. We do not recognize it easily as a carbon agroforest, although for the last decades scientists are discovering this again, that it was a carbon agroforest, that it was kind of built by the Amazon Amaranth. So we will have to do that, but outside of the Amazon forest on degraded agricultural lands. So this in order to stay in the 0 degrees at the poles, because if we don't do that, and if we maintain or even expand our actual agriculture and deforestation, we will reach the 2 degrees and the melting of poles, and we certainly will crash into glacier for 100,000 years or more, with all the consequences, especially for the West. So we have to transform agricultural lands, preferably degraded agricultural lands, into carbon agroforests. Transforming in Amazon forest like forests is not an option because we, we, we won't have the funds for it, and nobody will deliver that amount of land that is needed. What is needed is roughly, I think it's 7 million hectares of the Amazon forest. That's roughly what would be needed. We have enough agricultural land to transform. And in other videos, we work out that this transformation, sufficient transformation to keep the Earth cool, can be achieved in certainly less than 20 years. That is, if this would become a more or less global effort, at least an effort of some country of the scale of Brazil. So, so what we have to do now, we are still in the interglacial, is transforming agricultural lands in carbon agroforest as much as possible to avoid us reaching melting of the poles and crashing into a glacial. If we would crash into a glacial, if we would detect that we are crashing into a glacial, we can try to as much as possible to transform these forests that were grown to transform them in agriculture in and we will need the energy, by the way, because if it's cooling we will need the energy and the resources to, let's say, survive us crashing into a new glacier. Another thing we could try, is to explode uh, with nuclear material, explode the growing ice, the growing glaciers, so to speak, for the sun to reach the soil and to heat up the soil, because ice and snow reflect the sunlight and leads up to cooling. That's why every time we crash into a glacial, that it's like it feeds itself. It's self-reinforcing. So if you would crash, we have little options. There are no easy options. And we have no certainty at all that it will work. It never worked before. Uh, so we have to stay in the 0 degrees on the poles and avoid melting by transforming degraded agricultural lands in carbon agroforests. We don't have any other option than that.